Sabarmati riverfront. After that, we have Dr. Meenakshi. She is a former Hero Department of Environmental Planning. And in between, I'll take a small time on urban design issue, and especially the Sikkim earthquake, which just happened 2 months and 1 day back. So I hope you'll enjoy the session. May I invite Dr. Bimal Patel. Since Dr. Bimal Patel has to leave, we'll quickly have two questions after his session, so that we'll follow the other two presentations after that.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Okay, I hope you can hear me. What I'm going to talk about is the Sabarmati Riverfront Development Project. So I think you've already seen this presentation, so
I haven't actually.
You haven't? Okay, well, then I'm very, very glad that you're going to be here. Okay, let me start with this is quite an ambitious urban development project in Ahmedabad, and I'm going to try and explain what this is about. Next, please. So, first, let me tell you something about Ahmedabad and the Sabarmati River. Next. Ahmedabad was established on Sabarmati in 1411. Next, please. This is an early view, a Dutch engraving from 1672. That's the river here, and that's Ahmedabad in the background. Next, please. And Ahmedabad grew. It was on the eastern side of this river. The river runs north-south, and the water flows down this way. And Ahmedabad was for many years on the eastern bank of the river. And then during the 20th century, with industrialization, it grew into a big big city on both sides of the river here. You can see it occupies almost 300 square kilometers on both banks. Next, please. And today it's a sort of, you see it on Google, it's a vast city with the river running right through the middle. Next, please. Now, the Sabarmati River has always been important for Ahmedabad. Next. It provided, from the beginning, drinking water, and even today, about 25% of its drinking water comes from the river bed. Through shallow French wells of this sort, it's pumped out and treated and then given to the city. So it provides drinking water. Next, please. It was always a place for recreation. This is Shah Jahan's palace on the river. Next, please. Gandhiji decided to build his ashram on the Sabarmati River. So it's a nationally important river also. Next, please. Here's the bed of the river being used for a gathering of people during the national struggle. That's one of the first bridges built across the river. Next, please. The river has been extremely important for the poor in Ahmedabad, because the poor, not finding any other land to use for their housing, have found the banks of the river the place where they can build their hutments. So the river is very important for the poor. Next. It also was significant for washing and drying in the early days. Of course, a lot of washing and drying happened here. Next, please. And the river bed, or the bank actually, provided a place for a flea market like this called the Sunday market in Ahmedabad. It's an informal market mainly used by the poor. Next, please. And the bed also was used for farming when the river was dry. It's not a perennial river, it's a monsoon-fed river. Next, please. And yet, like all rivers in the country, the Sabarmati was abused and neglected. Next, please. So here you have, it became a place to dump garbage, as most of our rivers became over the 20th century. Next, please. And there was no, through the stormwater drains, there's a lot of untreated sewage coming directly into the river. This is the story all over the country. It's not really sewage lines put by the municipal corporation, but through the stormwater drainage you get sewage. Next, please. Here's another drain, that's Dandi Pool. Mahatma Gandhi crossed it to go to Dandi Kuch. And here's another Ganda Nala coming with sewage directly into the river. Next, please. The slums that were built on both banks have no services, of course, and therefore the sewage from all the slums, from 14,000 or 15,000 odd households, comes directly into the river here. Next, please. And of course, the slums also end up, by being built on the banks, end up reducing the cross section of the river, and therefore reduce its flood carrying capacity. So the slums, for the poor, this river is both a place to live and also a big threat. Next, please. And you could look at the city and you look at the development on both sides, it's rather lackluster, haphazard sort of development, and the city seems to have turned its back. Next, please. Back to the river. Next, please. Most importantly, if you look at the entire river, and this is, when there's water during the monsoon, the entire edge of this river is private. There's not a single, if anybody wants to walk along the edge of the river, you would have to cross private properties. It's like a beach you have built right all the way up to the, and they're private properties. And next, please. And whatever places there were to go down to the riverbed are choked up by slums, so you cannot really go down to the riverbed. And the only place where Ahmedabad people could enjoy the river from is the bridge. So you find in summer people promenading up and down the bridge. That's the only place you can enjoy the expanse of the river from. Next, please. And the city, in a sense, turned its back to the river turned its back to the river, and river became insignificant for the city. Next, please. Here's some other views you can see. It's not, it's like a nala passing through the middle of the city. Nobody cares for it. Next, please. Now, this is not how cities and other waterfronts world over are like. Next, please. Many cities in the world, next, please, are great waterfronts. You can see Paris, for example. The river is the big asset for the city, and that's where everybody gathers. It's like the big living room for the city. Next, please. You go to London, you find the same thing on both sides of the Thames. You can go in the evenings. Next, please. They're great places. You look at Sydney, you have the same sort of story. Next, please. And you look at Manhattan, you have a dense city like that. Next, please. But you will find a nice walkway like that. You can walk and jog, and beautiful place that you can go in the middle of the city. Next, please. And not just these big Western countries, but also China here you can see has this waterfront. Next, please. And Singapore has its waterfront like this. Next. And if you look at Shanghai, this is Shanghai, the river there, and this is the Great Bund, and that's how the people use the waterfront. Next, please. And of course, in Bombay, you have our own Marine Drive, which is a fantastic example of how city can use a waterfront. Next, please. Now, important thing to remember is that these cities were not given their waterfronts, these beautiful waterfronts, by God. They were developed as meaningful public spaces by the cities. These were not things that automatically they inherited. Next, please. Here you can see the Thames River. In 1817, you can see the Somerset House. You can see the river here. The boats could go directly in. At that time, the river was getting completely messed up. They were putting sewage in it. There was leather works on both sides. And the river was becoming more and more of a mess. So that by 1857, next please, you found that the river was such a mess that in 1857 they had to close down Parliament because it was stinking so much you couldn't sit in the Parliament. So then they decided to act upon it and do something. Next, please. And by 1875, you can see that Somerset House, the same place that you saw in the earlier pictures. This is how an embankment was built. All the sewage was collected and treated and sent off in sewers. So this is how their waterfront was built in 1850s, 60s, 70s. Next, please. And here you go today, you can walk along. Next, please. The same place. Next, please. Now the same with Sydney, you can see here, this was a sort of, many of these were industrial waterfronts, and that's where, next please, and that's where Sydney came up eventually, and you can see the waterfront become very important for the city. Next please. You can see New York had an industrial waterfront that was really not a pleasant place, but next, soon they developed it with parks like that, and further down other side. Next please. And Singapore, even in my grandparents' time when they visited, it was a stinky place. And here's Singapore, the river. Next, please. And that's tiny river today has, I don't mean these buildings necessarily, but they've cleaned up their river and it becomes an important place for the city. Next, please. And Chengdu in China, which had a river like this in 1993, with lots of slums and industrial pollution in the river, next please, has transformed its river in this manner. and it's once again, it's the city the size of Ahmedabad. So it's not just these Western countries, but even nearer home, people are transforming their rivers. Next, please. Now back to Sabarmati and Ahmedabad next. You find, that's the mess we left the river in. Next, please. And the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation became serious about doing something about the river in 1997 and set up a wholly owned company. A municipal corporation owns this company registered under the Companies Act to develop and make the riverfront. So it's a 100% public project which I'm talking about. There's no private development in it. Next, please. And at that time, in 1998, was when the first schematic proposal was drawn up after looking at all aspects of the project. So everything from physical features of the river to river hydraulics to land use and slums and implementation strategy, cost, project cost, etc. Everything was worked out at that time. Next, please. So it's the project that was devised at that time is a multi-dimensional environmental improvement, social upliftment, and urban rejuvenation project. It's not just one thing. It has many dimensions and many ambitions. Next, please. But before I explain them, let me first explain the context of the project. It's important to understand it. Next, please. If you look at Gujarat, that's Gujarat here, that's the Aravalli Hills. Next, please. And that's the river that comes, there's all the rainfall that falls here, comes gushing down in this river, Sabarmati, and empties in Gulf of Khambat here. And Ahmedabad is located at this point here, which means, next, please, all the rainfall that falls in this area gushes past Ahmedabad. Now, in the monsoon, you would get a lot of rainfall and you'd get a lot of floods. So there'd be, and the city and all the cities, all the towns along it would get affected. Next, please. So in 1976, long time ago, a dam was built here called the Daroi Dam, and a couple of other dams were built to control the floods that come into the river. We have built many such dams all across the country. Today, this much of the catchment is controlled by this dam, and on account of that, today there is no natural flood water that comes into the river, but only release from the dam. Next, please. That's the Daroi Dam which was built, and the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation had actually paid money to build it because it protects the city, and also because this used to bring drinking water to the city. Next, please. After that, at that same time in 76, for irrigation purposes, a barrage was built just downstream of Ahmedabad. Okay, barrage is the shallow dam where the gates go up, water doesn't flow on top. But this barrage was built to irrigate these downstream areas here using this Fatehwadi canal. And this barrage, the idea was that in the monsoon, most of the water would get held back here, but some of it would be held back here and it could be used for irrigation. So after the water was used up, the river was empty again. Next, please. So here you can see that barrage there, and this is the water that's held back. Next, please. It's a shallow dam, you can see. When the water gets used up for irrigation, there's nothing left. Next, please. And the river becomes dry again. And so through summer it's dry, and through monsoon it has a little bit of water. Next, please. Another most important thing that happened in the region was the building of the Narmada Dam. You can see the river here, Narmada River, and this dam was built, and from here a canal was built that happened to cross Ahmedabad just upstream. None of this happened by design, all of this happened quite by chance. And just upstream of Ahmedabad, the canal crosses and goes into Saurashtra and North Gujarat. And so next, please. What became possible? Here you can see a nearer picture. This is Ahmedabad here. You can see the river going down like that. That's the Vasna barrage. That's the water that is held back by the barrage. This is the canal for irrigation. And you can see just upstream of Ahmedabad this Narmada canal passing by. And they gave a little inlet so that you could actually replenish the water in this barrage and use it for irrigation. Next, please. And previous one, please. And so what this did was it made it possible for Ahmedabad to have water in this much area for the entire year. Ahmedabad ended up having the possibility of having a linear lake. It's basically a linear lake held back by the dam. And you had this linear lake, 12-kilometer long lake, right through the middle of the city. Next, please. Now this project, as I said, is ambitious. It has, next please, it has many different environmental social upliftment, urban rejuvenation type of ambitions. Next, please. There's a whole series of them. Let me go over them straight away. Next, please. The first ambition of the project is to make the riverfront accessible to the public. Next, please. I told you that this entire river edge is private, and the first ambition of the project is to socialize the edge of the bank of the river. Next, please. And the simple way that was done was to build two parallel embankments that go, cut right across, and to reclaim the land, just in the same way that Marine Drive was built in many years ago. And so you would get a sliver of land. Next, please. If this was, this is the river, you can see this barrage at this end. This is the water that is held back. These are the various bridges across. Next, please. And you build two parallel walls like this, and you reclaim all of this land which is in yellow. So you end up getting a sliver of land that runs right through the city, and this is the public realm. Next, please. Now, if you look at the section of the river where it's wide, it's quite wide, 679 meters, and the two walls could be built, two embankments could be built 275 meters apart, and here you would get a lot of land. But where the river is narrow, you would get very thin sliver of land. Next, please. Now, how was this done? This is the bank, one bank of the river you can see. This is the water that is held back by the barrage, the water level. When the flood comes, it comes to the top of this level, but this is what is held by, by the dam. And this is the stormwater drain that brings the sewage into the river. And this is the line that divides private property from public property. Next, please. So the first thing that was done was to take some soil from the river and build a construction platform like this with soil, and then put a concrete wall that goes into the bed of the river. You'll understand why this is done. And build a platform just about 2 or 3 feet on top of the water's edge here. And this is what is built here. Next, please. It's not very difficult to do this. You just have a simple jugaad you have to do. You have boats here with pipes and pumps, and they bring water and sand here, and the water flows back, sand stays here. You got your construction platform. Next, please. And soon you have a platform like that. And then you have to dig a trench like that. Next, please. So the trench is dug using equipment like that, and a concrete wall is built. Concrete is poured into this trench to build a wall that goes right down. It's called a cut-off wall or a diaphragm wall. Next, please. And this is the wall after it was built. You can see that the entire wall has been built here. The upper slab has been done that I showed you in the section. Next, please. Then the next job is to build this second wall here. So you build this second wall here, it's a retaining wall, and then you fill earth here. So you bring this level right to the top of the existing bank here. And next, please. And this is how the wall is built. You can see this is once again, not very complicated work. This is easy. Next, please. Here's the wall being built. Next, please. And that, these are steps coming down. Next, please. And you have, this is the earth fill being done at the back. There's a lot of earth fill that has to be done. You can get all of this earth from the river and put it here, because it's not that, when the next monsoon comes and the flood comes, it'll bring more sand and soil down. So that's not a big problem. Next, please. Once that is done, here's some more pictures of it. Next. And today, both of these sites have been complete, of course. So the entire length of the river is public. So that first ambition, so to say, of socializing or making the edge of the river public and accessible to the people has been achieved. I mean, some of the earthwork and things are still pending, but pretty soon it will get done. Next, please. Now, the next ambition is to stop the flow of sewage into the river, because what's the point creating all of this and having dirty water there? Next, please. So here's the pollution that comes in. Next, please. Here's more, and here's more. Next, please. Next. But the simple solution to that is, while this earth fill is being done, is to put a big interceptor pipe that connects all the places. These are all the places from where the sewage is coming into the river. So you connect all of that and collect the sewage and take it to 2 treatment plants, which once again for us were conveniently located at the 2 ends here on both banks. You already had just near the barrage, just beyond the barrage, we have treatment plants. Their capacity is augmented, and then you can take this pipe, collect all the sewage and take it right through. Next, please. So here's the pipe here. You can see it runs sort of in the, now just think of it for a minute. If this pipe was built without all of this other work, then you would have to make it very strong and it would have to have very strong foundations. But if you're, the synergy that you get from doing these things together is that this pipe doesn't cost very much to build. So this is the pipe, next please. And you can see that this is the previous, please. Previous, and that's that's the existing stormwater drain being connected to here. Next please. And you can see the pipe being laid in the mud here. Next please, in the soil. This is the pipe with the manholes. Next please. And these are the pumping stations. And I think in another month or so the pumping stations are the work. This is an old slide. The work is finished, so we can say that within another month or so the flow of sewage is going to stop. Next please. Then the other ambition of the project is to provide housing for riverbed slum dwellers, because there's lots of people you're going to have to dislocate to. Next, please. And so you have the slums here. Next, housing is Terminator.
You can just press OK.
Press OK. Okay, so here you have, that's where most projects get terminated also. But, here the slums you have. Next, please. That's the level of slums. It's about 14,000 households. Next, please. So, next. And, they're constantly in threat of being flooded and they don't have services. They're very unhygienic. So these are the sort of, this is the survey that was done in 1999, 2000, around 2000. Each and every household was surveyed to find out who is entitled for benefits. Next, please. And next, please, is a very detailed survey done by Bombay Agency. And basically, all these slums which are marked in blue here, which are along the edge of the river, the people are, allotted new housing, and these are all the resettlement sites. The point is that they will have to move, but they're not being thrown into the periphery of the city. But within the city, other municipal plots were found where housing could be built for the people who are in the slums. When the project started, these plots were not identified and not still available. So actually, if you look at the old project report, we said one simple thing. We said we are reclaiming so much land, we will use 10% of it to build the housing. Okay? But once the project got going, the municipal corporation said, why use riverfront land for housing? If it can be turned into parks and gardens, it's much better. So then all of this other land was found. These are all the relocation sites. Next, please. The relocation is being monitored by the Gujarat High Court. The plan is submitted to the High Court, and the High Court monitors what is happening. Only when the houses are ready is the project allowed to move the people. Next, please. And this is the sort of allotment phase when you have the next, please. And this is the sort of housing. I must say that it could be a little better. I'm an architect. I could have designed it a little better, but it's not designed by me. Next, please. And here's the sort of housing that people get. This is one of the households that has been already resettled. Next, please. And as you can see, these are, once again, this is as of 17th December. You have 6,000 households done. Average households daily, 25 to 40 being moved. At present, all the houses are ready, and there is people are going to move. Inevitably, this process is a bit messy, but the fact is that it's basically a voluntary process, and people are moving into housing of this sort. And the project, of course, pays for the housing in one way or the other. Next, please. That was the idea. Now, the other ambition of the project is to stop the risk of erosion and flooding in flood-prone neighborhoods. Next, please. What you find here, when the river is flooded, you can see it's like this. It's quite fearsome. It's not a small flood that comes in. Next, please. And the soil is such that whoever did not build a wall like this, their land would get washed away. So it's actually quite a fierce flood, and it's necessary for any modern city, any modern building, if it is built here, to have a wall. I mean, if you want to protect your river bank, you will have to build a wall. Next, please. And here's plots like this that were washed away. Next, please. And there are low-lying neighborhoods. This is supposed to be a contour map. Some low-lying neighborhoods constantly get flooded during the when the water is released from the dams. Next, please. And so now building the embankments, basically what it does is it protects the entire river bank from erosion, and it also protects some of the low-lying areas from flooding. So that's another objective that is achieved. Many people sort of, including myself, I mean, we don't like all of that concrete, but that concrete has a purpose in some sense. Next, please. Also, you must remember that the simple way in which the project was, the principle of design was simple. Intuitively, it seems that if you narrow a river like this, from this width to this width, then suddenly the water level should rise. I mean, that's intuitive sense. But you can see here what happens when you narrow a tube like that. When you narrow it, the velocity of water increases. So far as the velocity increase is the same as the cross-section area decrease, then the flood carrying capacity of the river remains constant. So if your velocity is going to increase by 5% and your cross section is going to decrease by 5%, then the flood carrying capacity is going to remain exactly the same. I'm simplifying a bit, but not too much. And that's the principle on which how did we decide on how much to narrow? Well, we narrow just enough so that the flood carrying capacity remains exactly what it was in the natural condition. So that's something to keep in mind. Next, please. And so this is not just some computer simulation. This is a release of water in the river during 2006 when a lot of measurements were taken and the calibration of the computer model was checked out. Next, please. And it was checked out by independent agencies, including IIT Roorkee, and we found that the model holds. So it's not some imaginary stuff that we're talking about. So even when you reduce the cross section, we find that it's exactly right. Next, please. And the risk of flooding is significantly reduced in low-lying neighborhoods on account of that. Next, please. Now the idea is to use all this land to create many parks, promenades and gardens to enjoy the water. I mean, that's really the purpose. You want to create public space here. Next, please. And so we are a density. You can see Jummah Masjid in the middle of the city. There's not a blade of grass growing anywhere in the walled city, practically. Next, please. And the western side of the city has a few more trees, but they are fast going as the buildings densify. Next, please. And so all this land can have beautiful parks and gardens if you want to. Next, please. And the idea is that all of these green spots here, this is the land that has been reserved for gardens, and there's a promenade that runs along the length of the river, also at the lower level, near the water. Next, please. Here you can see, this is actual photograph. You can see the revolving restaurant here. This is that lower promenade, which is entirely pedestrian. This presently is still not complete work here. You can see there's a slum here. There's Ganda Nala with the sewage going through. But here's a visualization of what this same place would be like after it's done. Next, please. Here's exactly, this is exactly the same spot with pedestrians below, and all of this land is actually a park along the river. Next, please. Or you can see here where a lot of the work is complete. You can see that's the revolving restaurant. You can see here this is a place where, this is the only place where we don't need to build a wall because there was existing fort wall there. Next, please. And all this will be a place like this with a few trees growing at this level. Of course, this level can get submerged during the floods, but this is, that's why there is no other activity here except pedestrian movement and walks. Next, please. Or here you can see this is the place where this walkway comes down, and someday, next, please, we will have these trees will have grown. The trees are already planted, by the way, and you will have a marathon here in Ahmedabad. It's just an imagination. Next, please. Or you can see here, this is the place where a sample was prepared. You can see this is the water walkway and the trees here. Next, please. And you can imagine a Sunday morning sometime not in the very distant future where you have. In fact, this place is going to be thrown open to the public in December, 27th December. For use. So the lighting is being finished. The trees have started growing. They're a little taller than in the earlier picture, but it'll get there. Eventually, these are all neem trees that we are growing, so they'll be big, and this becomes, at the water's edge, a place where you can walk and promenade. Next, please. Or you can see here, that's an existing temple, and this is, next, please. And here's a visualization of Ganesh Visarjan, the festival that we have where people come here with their Ganesh idols and take it down. This place has also started getting used now. Next, please. And here's another place where you have steps coming down, and this is just a romanticized visualization of kids dancing in Gagaland. Next, please. Here's Gandhi Ashram. This is the steps of Gandhi Ashram, which are already existing. Most of the work here is finished. Only the trees really have to grow. Next, please. And very soon, this could be a pleasant environment like this with a little bit of water and place where you can walk. Next, please. Now, the project will add almost 1 million square meters of, is that a million? Yes, 1 million square meters of parks, promenades and plazas to Ahmedabad in the center of town. This will now make it possible to go for a 10-kilometer cycle ride or a walk without any traffic around. Next, please. People started using it already. You can see here, this is that sample stretch I talked about. One day we were going there about a year ago, last year's, not this year's Ganesh Visarjan, which just happened a couple of months. This is about 14 months ago. And these people had come here with their Ganesh idol and suddenly found this clean place, because this was a sample we had done, it was kept clean, and broke out into a dance. I mean, our cities are so starved of places where people can act. Next, please. Here you are, just impromptu, took out their slippers and started. Next, please. And we were thrilled, really. Next, please. Now, the idea of this project is also to provide Ahmedabad with many new cultural, trade and social amenities. Next, please. Municipal Corporation of Ahmedabad is an old one, has in the past provided, things like the town hall, next please, or this hospital, next please, or this museum for which Corbusier was asked to come and design, next please. But this is the reclaimed land on which most of the social amenities are concentrated. Next, please. Here you can see this is Corbusier's museum. Here's already an existing museum of Ahmedabad. What we are thinking is that all of this land which has been reclaimed, this is going to be a mile-long stretch of cultural facilities. This is a new performing arts center and a series of museums that will be built and opening out onto gardens on this side and then eventually out onto the river on this place. Next, please. And here, for example, this is the existing hospital facility of the city, very low density development in center of town. And the idea is that this land from the riverfront can be used to build this hospital in a modern state, and this land can be freed up to do something else. That's a possibility. Next, please. Here's a trade fair facility on the eastern side of the river where you can have trade fair exhibitions. Next, please. And this is a visualization. That's the revolving restaurant. Here's the trade fairs happening, and along the river people can walk. This is a visualization of this area. Here's me standing there. Next, please. And this is the Sunday market that we have presently, and a new sort of better facilities for the Sunday market. Actually, we'll have an open air market that will work throughout the week. So one day it's the old Sunday market, one day it's the shoe market, one day it's etc. It can be seasonal markets. And there's about 1,200 vendors can have a place there. Tenders are out to build this. Next, please. Here's another place where we have plazas like this. This is on the reclaimed land. Places for informal vendors also. This project has benefits for a wide range of people, not just few of the people. Next, please. Here you have, next, please. Also the idea is to revitalize riverfront neighborhoods. Next, please. This project, this runs through the middle of the city. Next, please. And its idea is that this project can be used to transform the areas along the river. Next, please. And precincts have been identified, and precinct plans are being prepared for all the neighborhoods along, for essentially what is their character, what can they be in the future. Next, please. Here you have the central business district. So here there is the riverfront, and then next, please, which is quite low density development, and it will be increased. Next, please. Here's another place like that, and that's the municipal waterworks, which needs to be reorganized. Next, please. And we can have a big educational facility here. Next, please. The idea of this project is all to stitch East and West Ahmedabad together. Next, please. Ahmedabad's a divided city. That's the rich part. That's the poor part. Next, please. By making the river vibrant. Next, please. And creating a lot of activities in the middle. Next. What you get is, the city starts looking at the center again and tying up the two sides. Next, please. And that's really the aim of the project. Next, please. Other ambition of the project is to generate resources to pay for all of these. Who's going to pay for all of these works? Next, please. So the idea was from the beginning that some of the land that is reclaimed would be sold. And from the sale of land, you would get resources to pay for all of these activities, because not a pie of government funding is to be used in doing any of these works, despite the fact that it's a 100% government project. However, remember that there's not the aim of making cash profits. Next, please. Originally the project costs and were worked out, and only that much amount of land was to be sold that would be necessary to pay for the project, which happened to be at that time 20% of the land that is reclaimed. However, when the project became real, more and more people see the possibility and want, the prices for that land go up. So it's possible to sell less land. So presently, we have the sale amount of land for sale has been capped at 14.5%. So actually, it has gone down so that the rest of the land can remain for the city. Next, please. And the idea is these blue spots are the areas where it will be sold. Nowhere will the edge of the river be sold. That is very clear. Next, please. And it's these locations along bridge ends which are very, very pricey, and you can sell those pieces of land. Next, please. Or you take a look at these two ends. Next, please. Or here along this bridge, if you sell that much portion of land, there's some municipal land at the back, so if you sell it together, they can pay for all of that park and garden that's already being built there. Next, please. And presently, as I said, 14.5% is the land for sale. Next, please. And the idea of this project is to create a memorable identity for Ahmedabad. Next, we have our Sidi Syed Jali, and next we have our Gandhi Ashram to sort of people remember it by that. Next, please. But otherwise, it's quite a lackluster place. So here's the revolving restaurant in Ahmedabad, and someday, next, please, it'll be possible to have a river and an entire, sort of. Next, please. Or here's the balcony from our office. Next, please. And someday all of this will be green and useful. Next, please. Or look at this spot here, which is in the center of town, and this is where the business district is, but pretty dense, pretty low density development just now. Next, please. And this is the place where some of the land is going to be sold. This is a market along the river, and you can see the visualization of this place. Next, please. Here's yet another place. You can see there are slums on this side. There is this is the walkways. Next, please. Someday this will be completely different riverfront, not very far in the future. Next, please. And we hope that this city will be known for bringing the river back to Ahmedabad and bringing Ahmedabad people back to the river. Thank you very much.